A lot of people feel that inflammation is bad. Inflammation is actually not bad at all. Inflammation is good because our body's trying to clean up that area of what's happening in our skin. So whether it's an actual cut, it could be a bruise, there is an invasion of bacteria or pathogens within our skin or within our body, the white blood cells are there to try and clean up that section or clean up the body. When we are overstressed, we are triggering inflammation in the body, and there's not actual trauma, there's not a cut, there's not a bruise, there's nothing actually happening, but our body feels like there is, so it's in this constant state of inflammation. So what did I do to calm down my inflammation? I started Welcome to the Skin Deep podcast, everyone. This is your go-to podcast for everything skin health and self-care, especially when it comes to eczema, dermatitis, and other sensitive skin conditions. I'm very excited about today's episode. I am talking about everything inflammation and how I even calmed my own inflammation. I feel like the journey that I've been through over the last 4 months has really made me understand what was triggering my skin, how I built my skin from the cellular level back to this new foundation, and really becoming more grounded in my body than I was before. Because again, if you haven't seen the other episodes or listened to the other episodes, I went through a very traumatic, full body, blown flare up of my eczema. And I've never had that kind of experience in a very long time. I mean, over 15 years, I have not had an experience like that. Usually I've had an eczema flare up on my hands, on the back of my legs once in a while, especially like in the summertime when my skin was heated from the hot summer and so forth. But I haven't had it where it went from my face to my neck, to my hands, to my arms, to my legs, to the front of my legs. And that was strictly because I really did go through a major transition and transformation in my personal life where I had to really understand what was going on with me. So I'm very happy to be going over all of the things that I did for the last 3-4 months to bring my inflammation down from where it was at that time. So again, in the beginning, which was about September, my whole life really changed quite a bit. I gave myself histamine intolerance, and I had a lot of mental issues that I was dealing with, and I just didn't feel like myself. I felt very just not in tune with myself. Overall, my mental state, my body, my career, everything was going crazy. And because of that, my body went through a very, explosive eczema episode. And it looked very similar to like TSW. The main thing that I realized is that, like I said in other episodes, I was eating kimchi thinking probiotics definitely help my body, but I was over and indulging on them. And because I was over and indulging in it, I threw my body from this, I'm repairing my gut just because I wanted to make sure my gut was very fortified, to I overdosed. And I would say overdose because it's just like, what's the right word to say that you overindulged in a probiotic such as kimchi, that's fermented foods, that made my body just say, oh, we don't like this, and my body just went into serious inflammation. And then on top of it, my mental state was very anxiety, anxious, depressive. I was fight or flight. I just wasn't paying attention to that. And those things really contributed to my eczema flare up. And again, the great weather in Canada was transitioning, so that also played a part in it. So, if you look at our social media, you'll see some of those things that I was going through in terms of my hands and my body and so forth. And the eczema is really just left over on my legs. And I really got to see a little bit better better how my body responds to things on my legs than versus my hands, because my hands are completely clear, which again, if you see the videos there, you would know that I went through some serious stuff. But, I really want to make sure that we understand those stages of how I calm my inflammation and how our bodies really rebuild itself. I don't want everyone to feel like there's a cookie cutter way of fixing your eczema. Everyone has a different trigger. Everyone has different things that really affect their eczema. And that's something that you have to do that self-reflection on. It can't be just, okay, I'm going to change my food and that's it. You have to really take inventory of all the different things that are affecting your overall body, mind, spirit, soul, environment, and so forth. So, what's crazy is when I first started the podcast and it wasn't very serious as to what my skin felt like and looked like, I couldn't wear shirts, because my eczema was all over my neck, and you can still see a bit of remnants of it. If you see the beginning of this podcast, you would see I wore this exact same shirt. My hair was in my braids and my skin was glowing. And then all of a sudden, obviously I went through that episode and that trial, my body just was like, nope, I can't. And I couldn't wear anything that exposed my neck because my skin was so inflamed, irritated, red, patchy, dark, like it was like really bad. So now to see that I'm able to wear things that I used to wear, I just feel joyful. I feel amazing. I feel that discipline, that perseverance, that focus, that drive, dedication is paying off. And it's not to say that I'm full clear going, but it's just the fact that that progress is there, and we have to, recognize those progresses and just keep going. It's really easy to stay in a state of, Debbie Downer, if you want to call it, and I don't even want to call it a name, but I would just say in that state of like giving up, depressed, and just like hopeless. It's easy to stay in there, and it takes a lot of, optimism to move forward, even though sometimes we don't want to. So, well, without further ado, let's kind of get into that topic. Like I said, we are going over how I calm my inflammation in basically 4 months. And it's really understanding, the cycles and the stages of rebuilding our skin. The first episode, I went over the stages of eczema, and there is so much controversy, but there's also some other opinions of there's more to it. There's more to it. Of course, there's more to it. There is not one basic stage. There is so much complexity to each stage, but if you look at it, you really can break it down into 4 stages. So like I said, the first episode of the podcast, I went through the 4 stages of eczema. But when I look at the comparison of those 4 stages of eczema and the 4 major stages of rebuilding our skin, they're very much interconnected. They're very much similar to each other in terms of what's happening. So, it's great to go back to that episode to get a bit of that overview and then really understand what I'm talking about today. But my mission is really to go deep on all of these different stages and make sure everyone understands what's happening at each stage, because we can see there's so many different types of eczema. There's so many different stages your different body parts can be going through. And you have to almost look at, okay, this part of my body is going through this stage, let me treat it this way. This part of my body is going through this stage, let me treat it. And then let me also take a look at what's going on inside internally, what's going on externally, what am I putting on my body? So then that way I can really maximize the stage that I'm in, so I can go to that healing, that goal of healing and not really feeling itchy and scratchy. Okay. So the 4 stages of rebuilding our skin really are the basis, the foundation to understanding what we're dealing with, what we can do, and how we can really get to that next stage. So the first stage, I'm quite sure everyone is understanding, is homeostasis, meaning our skin is cut. We have an issue, for example, I cut myself or our body has a broken skin area. And that's usually, like I said, the inflammation stage of eczema, where our skin is broken open. We have rashes, we have irritations, it is red, flaming, and so forth is happening on our skin. So when it comes to like a skin cut, it's when our skin's broken, so we're bleeding and so forth. So blood vessels are constricting, and we have platelets that are coming to that area to clot the blood or to clot the area to prevent it from bleeding. Now, when you're kind of looking at that from a skin eczema perspective, we kind of want to ask ourselves, like, we're not bleeding, so why am I getting this inflammation? Why am I getting this trigger? Those triggers can come from many different things. So like I said, for myself, I was eating a lot of kimchi, which is fermented, which triggers histamine, and I overindulged in it. So my body went into this like heightened state of releasing histamine. So my body was like, this feels like a wound. My body felt like there was an issue. So, that's where it's like, okay, what's going on with our body or our overall mental state, or what are we using on our skin that's making our body go into like a homeostasis? Or the next stage, which is called inflammation. So stage 2 is inflammation. So when we are thinking about this, stage 2 is when our body's trying to wound clean up. It's like, let's start cleaning up this area on our skin. And that's when we have heat, we have pus, we have that rashes, there's probably broken skin there. And that's when it's like, okay, our body is inflamed, and that inflammation is telling us that we need to clean up this area. So this is where I find a lot of people feel that inflammation is bad. Inflammation is actually not bad at all. Inflammation is good because our body is trying to clean up that area of what's happening in our skin. So whether it's an actual cut, it could be a bruise, there is an invasion of bacteria or pathogens within our skin or within our body, the white blood cells are there to try and clean up that section or clean up the body. Where this is gone wrong, and I talked about this with Dr. Jason Granzotto, is when our body's in a constant state of inflammation. And that constant state of inflammation, meaning a chronic inflammation, is where there's the big issue. When we have a cut on our skin, awesome. That's where it should be quickly dealt with by the body, where it'll go in, clot the area, stop the bleeding. Now we're going to start getting that inflammation because it's trying to clean up that area. And then after that, then we're going to that next stage. But when we feel inflammation consistently throughout our body, that's when there's an issue. And this is what I talk about, that I kind of felt that was happening, but I wasn't really paying attention to it. This is something that where it's actually under or not seen by people, or it's just like overlooked, is that we don't realize when we are having, anxiety, panic attacks, stress, high stress levels, or you're just chronically stressed, we don't realize that's triggering inflammation in our body. It's triggering, our body to be in this fight or flight mode. And that's what was happening to me. I was not paying attention to the fact that I was chronically stressed. Even though I was trying to do the great things for my body, I was chronically stressed out. I was working around the clock. I was overworking. I was doing this, going here, doing there. I just kept pushing and pushing and pushing myself, and not realizing that was what was causing me to have inflammation in the body, but I was not paying attention to it. I felt hot. I couldn't sleep. I wasn't sleeping enough. I was sometimes overeating. I was consistently working. I was always checking my phone. I just wasn't allowing myself to rest. I wasn't allowing myself to relax myself and do my usual rituals that I do on a regular basis that calmed me down, that made me feel relaxed. I just was like, gotta push. My company's doing great. I gotta keep going. And unfortunately, that's what caused me to have chronic inflammation in the body. So I've had this conversation with nutritionists, doctors, homeopaths, naturopaths, and they all say the same thing. When we are overstressed, we are triggering inflammation in the body, and there's not actual trauma, there's not a cut, there's not a bruise, there's nothing actually happening, but our body feels like there is, so it's in this constant state of inflammation. So what did I do to calm down my inflammation? I started meditating a lot. That was my first thing. I was meditating daily and sometimes 2 to 3 times a day. I stopped looking at my phone after a certain time. I stopped watching TV after a certain time before I had to go to sleep. And I just started to really put myself in this focused plan of lowering my cortisol levels throughout the day and lowering my anxiety throughout the day. So that entailed, like I said, meditating 2 to 3 times a day. My first meditation be the first thing I do when I get up, and my second meditation is what I do right before I go to sleep. And this thoroughly helps me just like calm down and take it down a notch. The types of meditation that I did was box breathing in the beginning, because box breathing, if no one's really familiar with it, you take a 4-second inhale, you hold it, a 4-second pause, you hold it, 4-second release, you hold it, 4-second hold, and then after that, 4-second breathing in. So it's like, again, you can look it up online. It was just really allowing your brain and your heart to come to a pause, reconnect, slow down, and centering yourself. I would do that sometimes, driving wherever I was driving, or if I was sitting down and eating after I ate. I did it a few times throughout the day. It's the easiest way to do a meditative kind of session without it being so strenuous. It shouldn't take so much of your time. You could literally do it for about 3 minutes, and it calms and centers you down. It centers your mental state and your body and your emotions, and it takes that consistent breathing and that consistent thinking to you're like centered and you're relaxed. So, there's a lot of research out there about box breathing, and I kid you not, there was one time that I almost got in a car accident, and that was in November 2024. Or not even car accident, someone like tried to swerve in front of me and I had to brake really hard. And it's like automatically my anxiety just went up high. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And right away, when I got to that red light, I did the box breathing and I just came right back down. I was centered. I felt great. I felt calm, and it really helped me. So that's one thing that I did was meditation. So I do the box breathing throughout the day, a couple of times throughout the day. I'd meditate in the morning. I'd meditate at night before going to sleep. The next thing that I did that helped me calm my inflammation was I was really focused on my diet. So on my diet, like I mentioned before in other episodes, I stuck to literally the same foods for the last 4 months. I still haven't changed my foods yet. I've been implementing a few items into my foods, like into my meals, but I've really focused on keeping it the exact same thing every single day. So for instance, my breakfast was Brussels sprouts or bok choy in combination with scrambled eggs. And then I would have plantain. That was my morning breakfast. With that, I would have either milk thistle tea, stinging nettle tea, turmeric tea. Those are the only things that I drank, or I had black coffee, and the black coffee I would have MCT oil mixed in with it. All of those different teas are helping calm inflammation in the body. They help your liver offload. It helps with just calming down your system. It helps with inflammation. Like it helps with just getting you off of that inflammation train. So those were what I had for breakfast. For my lunch, I would always have the same thing, whether it's cod or haddock, or I would have beef, like I would have steak. Those are the two different types of meats that I would have. And then as my side dish would be either wild rice, white rice, or salad. And again, I would add on Brussels sprouts or bok choy with it. Those were my meals, and I would interchange based on if I was having salmon, like a fish, or if I was having it with like a meat. I try to stay away from chicken. Again, we know sometimes chicken is not the best source of things that you can eat from it unless it's, organic, but those are really what I focused on in terms of my meals. And then my sweet tooth, it would be pomegranate and blueberries, and I have it right beside me. So I'd have pomegranate and blueberries, and I would mix it in with certain nuts and seeds. So it'd be like sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, mulberries, it's right beside me, almonds, and then I would have dark chocolate with it. So that is my sweet tooth. So those meals I've been having since this flare up happened, which was October ideally, because that's when I really focused on and had to do my research of what to eat. So, those are what I basically been eating. And I would say the few things that I plugged in here and there just to kind of see if I feel okay is I would make my own dessert, such as blueberry or dark chocolate muffins, banana muffins, just so then that way I could, just plug in to see how I feel. I would plug in maybe a different tea, like a black tea. I'd plug that in once in a while. I would start adding in chicken here and there. And most of the time my body was okay with it, but a lot of times I felt a little bit irritated, like I can't have coffee from everywhere, because sometimes I would have that that trigger, and it's just because the coffee was old. So that's where I would stop, eating certain things from places, because I would know what's, good to eat, what's not good to eat, especially if it's like old or not. So those are the things that I ate in terms of calming down the inflammation. And then, like I said, what I did mentally for my mental state or my mental health, I did a lot of meditations. So those are the two things that I did from there. Now, from a skin perspective, again, Everbella is the brand that I created to treat people with eczema. So the products that I use from Everbella is what I use on a regular basis to help my skin calm down. So the one thing for sure is every week I was doing a Dead Sea salt soak in the bath. Like, I would love to have done it twice a week, but sometimes I just didn't have the ability to do it. But for sure, every Sunday I was in that bathtub and I was soaking with that Dead Sea salt. And again, the ones that I used was from the Ever Gentle or the Ever Hydrate, and I'd put those two into the bathtub and I would soak for about half an hour. And in there, I would listen to calming, meditating music just to keep my skin, just to bring down that thought process, or the nagging monkey mind that we would always call. And then after that, I would put on a butter or an oil on my skin, and I would just do that every single day. Every day I soaked my body from head to toe in a butter or an oil. And then there's days where I feel like, yes, my skin needed a little bit more, so I would use a lotion from other brands. We are going to be releasing that very soon from the Everbella collections, because I feel like lotions are something that I really love, and I know our skin needs it, but it still takes time to formulate and make sure that we have that perfected formulation. So I would use another brand, and I also used the one that we're creating against each other just for research and development. I think that's why I was so stressed. So I would test those out on my skin as well, but that's what I was using to make sure that my skin was feeling hydrated, and I would lock it in with that oil or that butter. So every, week, I would be soaking in Dead Sea salt. Every day I would have that same routine of cleansing, moisturizing, locking it in. Now, beyond just using those products, I feel like what's super important is that we're really paying attention to ingredients in our products, because things that have fragrances, colorants, are very high in alcohol or chemicals, is what starts to break down our skin barrier. And it's really important that we understand that certain products that we're using can either hurt or help our skin. And when you're trying to get rid of inflammation, you want to use things that are very, very calming on your skin, have a lower pH level so we can close the pores in order for our skin to start repairing itself. Because once we get rid of that inflammation, we get into the third stage of skin rebuilding, and that's called proliferation. And this is when our body is creating new skin tissue. And this is so important because I find there's like this cycle that a lot of people talk about online of like, inflamed, and then I thought my skin was going great. I'm inflamed and I thought it's going great. It is. It's just that we have to remember we're building layer by layer by layer by layer all over again. And that's where sometimes you feel like giving up because you're just like, you want to happen quicker. You want it to be like, we're done, beautiful, voila. But we have to remember our skin has layers and we have to build these layers all over again. We're really remodeling our skin. So if you're not really paying attention to the fact that your skin has layers and we need to rebuild and fortify and thicken each and every layer, you're missing the point of the fact that our skin needs that. So if we kind of look back at when our skin gets a cut, when it gets a cut, it's rebuilding, we get that scab, and then you're like, okay, it should be good. But then if you take the scab off too early, you could break the skin and it will break open and you have to do that repair steps all over again. It's the same thing when we're rebuilding our skin after eczema, especially if it's been eczema that's been like trauma for a very long time. We have to remember that it's not just going to rebuild and it's all good and we're good to go, because that skin will be very, very thin. Right now, what we have to understand is that we need to rebuild it in layers and layers and layers, so then that way that skin is nice and fortified. So when I looked at my hands and the fact that they both have the same color tone that they had before, if I'm looking at my neck, some areas of my neck have a little bit more of a clear tone and some areas still have a bit of shadow casting, is because I'm still getting those new skin, thicker, fortified layers coming to the surface. Because if you're not paying attention to that, you'll notice that area is easy to get cut. It's easy to be irritated. It's easy for it to be thin and flaky and so forth, because we're getting that fascia to get thicker and thicker and thicker. So like I said, the proliferation stage is when our body is building new tissue. The things that people don't realize, and I never realized it myself, is through this area we're repairing the damage, we're also creating new blood vessels. Let me tell you, I was very shocked with this stage when I did the research, is that I just felt like, oh yeah, we're just rebuilding the skin, but no, we're rebuilding even new blood vessels because some of them are broken. Some of them are damaged beyond repair. So it's like we're creating new blood vessels. We are creating a more thicker fascia. We're creating that thicker collagen is coming in to start rebuilding the skin. So proliferation is actually the most important stage, but it also takes almost the longest stage to getting the new skin that we're looking for, that repaired skin. So this is why it's so important that we really focus on getting rid of that inflammation, calming down that inflammation, being patient with the inflammation, because it's important in order for us to get into proliferation, and that proliferation happening almost universally. So for example, my hands, absolutely clear. My neck, absolutely clear. My arms, for the most part, are I would say 80% clear. My legs, my thighs are 80%, 80 to 90% clear. It's my lower legs where I'm at that 70 to 80% clear. And it's because I almost feel like it's like starting from the top and it's draining through to my feet, where it's like it's going through like this distillation, it's going through from top to bottom on my body, and that's okay. I'm fine with it. I'd rather it go through its stages versus, rushing. but it's like the bottom of my legs, it's still between inflammation to proliferation. The rest of my body is proliferation. And I notice it because the bottom of my legs, it had very circular web-like patterns of eczema that I've never experienced in my life. I've never ever seen that before. And this is where I had to relearn what's going on down there. And I thought it was a staph infection and so forth. And it was just the fact that that area, I was irritating it more unconsciously. Like when I was sleeping, I didn't realize I was scratching my legs, and that's why it got worse. On my arms and everything else, I kind of didn't really, I know that I wasn't scratching it because it was healing faster. So, this time I really paid attention to my legs because it's like right in front of my face. So I've seen step by step of how my body went through the homeostasis to the inflammation to the proliferation. Because what you're going to see in proliferation is pink skin. Skin that has no color to it. It almost looks like when you get a cut, the scab falls off and you have like that fresh skin that's there that seems like baby paper wafer kind of skin. And this is like where I had to take really gentle care with it. I was massaging it. I was using red light therapy on it. I was wearing cotton clothing on it. I've been treating it like a baby, as if like I need to nurse it. And this is what's so important is after we get through that inflammation stage and we're going into the proliferation stage, it's super important that we take extra care for the new skin, but don't fall off of your routine and your discipline. And why I find this so funny is because this is when we're like, we're good. Everything is amazing. Don't even worry about it. Just like keep going. And like you almost stop your discipline. You almost stop focusing on what was so important, like what was working for you. You're like, you almost go back to the bad things that you were doing. You're scratching a little bit more. You're not like paying attention. So this is when it's like, no, stay focused, stay super focused, red light. Do not do anything that was causing you to have the inflammation again. So for example, like myself, don't itch anymore, because this is where like you'll get the flakiness. So this is relating to stage 3 in eczema. You're going to get the flaking, you're going to get the dryness, you're going to get that new skin. So it's like you really want to make sure that you're hydrating yourself, you're drinking a lot of water, you're taking your supplements consistently, you're consistently eating the right foods, you're sleeping more. You really want to sleep more, because once you get through that inflammation, you can sleep a little bit better. I was making sure I took a lot of magnesium at nighttime, and iron and copper, because zinc and copper, because those help with rebuilding new skin. And omega-3 fats, they're really good with repairing the skin. So these are things that I had to really focus on, because proliferation is very important in order for you to rebuild that skin, but to continue on that path of rebuilding skin. So it is going to go from that pink skin to the dark colored skin. So you'll start to see that skin starts to look dark, and it's like it feels a little bit like that elephant skin. Some people say that. I noticed that it just looked darker, and it almost looks like it's not healing, but it is healing. It's just our body goes through PIH, so post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, and that PIH sometimes is just our body's natural mechanism to protect itself from, again, sun exposure, free radicals, UV rays, and so forth. So it does go a little bit darker just to kind of help that body repair itself. And then eventually it will go back lighter, especially if you're keeping up with your rituals of skin. So again, that proliferation is like the key component stage. I really want everyone to understand it's the stage where once you come off of that tail end of inflammation, we really anchor down and we focus on our skin rebuilding section. Okay, so then we get into that fourth stage, and the fourth stage is called remodeling stage, also maturation stage or maturation stage. So the remodeling stage is the one that will take couple of weeks or a couple of months to as many months to years. And this is just because it's strengthening and refining the skin. But if you set up your skin properly in the stage 3 of the proliferation stage, this stage won't be too hard to come by. And this stage is, like I said, we're going from that collagen type 2 to collagen type 1. So the difference between it is when you're looking at collagen type 2, this is the wound healing collagen, right? So it's protecting the skin. You have that new skin layer. It's pink and so forth. And we're trying to replace it with collagen type 1, where it's that permanent skin, refortified. It's your natural skin color. It's rejuvenated. It's pliable. Because when I noticed when I had that eczema and it was still in the new rebuilding stage, proliferation, I still felt tight. Like I couldn't really bend it. Like it was really tight. So the most important thing is this stage is where we're relatively getting into that good skin, the thick skin, right? So again, same idea. You really want to make sure that you're staying on that discipline of your skin rituals. You're not falling back into, let me eat everything now because my skin is all good. No. We're still not going to do that. You can slowly introduce foods back into your diet. You can slowly introduce, different products or different activities, but you don't want to go from like really disciplined to like all hell breaks loose. So this is what happened to me in October going into November. Ideally, I decided to have guacamole, not realizing that guacamole has high histamine because avocados are high in histamine. And yeah, then I went back into inflammation. And it's because I was like, yeah, everything's awesome. My hands are free. They're clear. Because at the end of my 30-day healthy skin challenge, my skin was beautiful. Everything was great. I didn't have the inflammation on my legs. I didn't have any of that eczema on my legs. So everything was great. And then I decided to have some guacamole. And then my skin just went boop. You were too excited, chick. Let's bring you back. You didn't learn your lesson. And that's when everything went haywire. All of a sudden, my skin was just going, I just started screaming all over the place. So that's where I just felt like I wanted to give up. I went into this downward spiral all over again. My anxiety went out the roof because I was just like, how dare you? Like I was so close. I'm so close. And all of a sudden now, look what I did. And you play the blame game, the, victim game and, so forth. And I didn't want to see anybody. I was like, keeping inside. I'm going to hermit myself. And it was around Christmas time is when I started to come back out of my shell because I realized if I can fix my skin the first time, I can do it again and I can do it even better than what I did before. So that's where I'm at right now, where it's like, I feel free, I feel calm, I feel like back to myself that I was, feeling again because I just was like, no, I'm not going to allow myself to go back into that downward spiral because I know exactly what I'm doing and I feel even better about what I'm doing. So, the proliferation stage and the remodeling stage are they're very linked together, interconnected, because this is where you're flaking a lot. You're going to be flaking all day. And I took pictures of my flaking. Like I have pictures of my floor when I would get out of bed and it felt like snow. It's so disgusting, but it felt like snow was coming down every time I moved. I would take my clothes off and I would turn them inside out and I would look at all of the flaking on my clothes and I would just like knock them out. And I'm just like, what the frick is this? It's like a whole pile of skin flaking. And I would sweep it together and I'm just like, that is some nasty shit. Excuse my language, but that's nasty nonsense. But this is like the best stage because you're literally shedding all of that broken, dead skin and revealing the good skin, the new skin. And this is the stage that we all want to be in, but we're like, I hate the flaking, but this is this time where you should embrace it. It's just that it's not the most comfortable, because think of like a snake shedding its skin. It's itchy. It's like, ugh, I just want to scratch the crap out of it. Even right now, I want to scratch the crap out of it, but it's like, no, you got to let it be. Sometimes I felt very irritated, so I take ice packs and I just put it on certain areas. I put it on my arms, I'd put it on my back, on my neck, I'd put it on my chest. Like, I would do things like that just to help with easing that irritation. And it's just because, those blood vessels and your skin receptors are like tingling, because it's just like all connecting, and you don't realize like what's happening in your skin. So it's just like, it just feels uncomfortable. But this is, like I said, the stage where I would be really excited about, because you are going into revealing that new body, that new skin that you really want. It's just, this is where we kind of go from like the flaking irritation and thinking that we're doing something wrong. And then we start getting into that mental state that triggers that anxiety, that will trigger the inflammation again. And your body's like, oh, okay, I guess we want to go back to inflammation. So it goes back there. This is where you're supposed to keep faith. Keep faith, keep the love, keep the discipline, keep going and not giving up, because your body is so close to that area where it is creating new skin. It's just that sometimes it will go from body part to body part and work its way through. We want everything to do it all at one time, but sometimes it's not possible. And we have to remember that it takes time. But it can happen throughout the whole body. It's just that we have to really be mindful that some areas are at different stages than the others. And we can't speed it up in those other areas if we treat it separately and differently than the other areas. So if I have inflammation on my legs, which I did, I treated it differently than how I treated my neck and my hands. So it's like you really have to be very mindful of those things, and then take accordingly the right steps to treat each area very differently. But the remodeling stage, it's beautiful. I didn't even realize my neck and my hands were in the remodeling stage, because I was too busy paying attention to my legs that was in the inflammation stage. And then after that, I was like, oh shit, hold on, my hands are not irritated. Oh my God, I have no like redness or cracked skin on my hands. And I cried. I cried because I didn't even notice it. I was too busy paying attention to the negative versus paying attention to the positive. And I think that's what we have to remember, is to still take the wins and pay attention to those more than paying attention to the losses, which is not a loss, it's just a momentary waiting moment for the win. Right? So yeah, so these are the 4 stages of skin remodel or rebuilding. And I'm so excited to talk about this. And I really want to talk about this so much more in depth, because I feel like there's layers to it. There's much more deep information that we can go into on this. And, it takes time. It took a solid 4-5 months for me to get through these stages and to be at the stage where I'm at now, where I feel proud of myself and feel proud of where I've been. It's a learning lesson. It hurts when you're in the lesson, but when you overcome it, you're like, thank gosh I did, because then I wouldn't have cleaned up this, I wouldn't have cleaned up that, I wouldn't have done this, I wouldn't have done that differently, I wouldn't be more focused on my mental health, I wouldn't have been more focused on what I'm putting on my skin. So I hope we all understand that some of these lessons are necessary for us to bring us to a next stage of our life and really be open to what is necessary for our lives. So I hope you enjoyed this episode today. I definitely want to go a little bit more on this subject, and I hope that you'll join me in the next episode on it. But again, if there are questions, things that you want to comment on, tell us about your story, please go ahead and, put it in our comments below, send us an email, share your experience on social, and stay connected. And as always, this is your guide to true skin health and well-being, especially when it comes to eczema, dermatitis, and sensitive skin conditions. I'm your host, Mekisha Banks from Everbella, and I'll see you next time in the next episode. Thanks. Thanks for tuning in to the Skin Deep podcast. Don't forget to download your free guide to our 10 hacks to great skin. Just check the link in our bio. I look forward to seeing you in our next episode. Have an amazing day, everyone, and enjoy your self-care Sunday.